Okay, well, I'm here in the studio with our international affairs editor, Philip Turl, who's standing by with us. I'm also joined by Nassim Majidi, who is director of the Samuel Hall Research Centre. Let me ask you, first of all, thank you very much, by the way, for joining us. The international evacuation of civilians is going to have to wrap up anyway in the next couple of days. Given what's happened today, how seriously affected would you say that process has been?
So we know, unfortunately, that the evacuations are stopping. So the last flights going out to Canada, Italy, France are all scheduled for tomorrow. Today already, the airport was completely closed to Afghans, and there were 2 suicide bombings. And what's really scary is that the people who were there, the 10,000 people who were there at the airport, are journalists, members of civil society, professors, researchers, people who defended a vision of society that's closest to that of the international community than that of the Taliban, and quite opposed to that of the Taliban. The Taliban have blocked Afghans from leaving their country, so they immediately, when they seized territory, started blocking all borders. Now they've blocked the airport, and clearly they're trapping these people inside. So what's scary for these many Afghans, and my colleagues were in the crowd today, is that they feel trapped. They were on lists to be evacuated, and now they're afraid that they're going to be on the lists of Talibans who are going to come after them, track them, find them. They're going door to door and kill them. So there's an immediate need to still get those people out, even though the evacuations are stopping.
So how many people are we talking here? People to whom France and other international powers owe safe passage. And if the airport is off limits, what alternatives are there for getting these people out of the country's land borders?
So the answer to the first part of your question is we owe it to all Afghans who are at risk. So all Afghans who want to leave and seek protection abroad should be entitled to it. It's not a question of numbers. The Geneva Convention doesn't set a quota of number of people that are eligible to be refugees. Right now, all Afghans under the Geneva Convention have a right, and it's our right to allow them to seek protection abroad. So I would say the entire population, if they want to leave, they should be granted the opportunity to leave. It's their universal human right to leave, and it's the obligation of states to allow them the protection that they deserve. So I would say it's really for all of them. Now that the airport is closed and we created this crisis, and when I say we, it's the Americans created this crisis by not planning for this. It was not part of any of their contingency plans. There was one airport in the entire country to evacuate people. It was going to be, chaos. So now what we need to do is to have a humanitarian corridor, not just in one city, but across Afghanistan, a space for humanitarian aid to reach people who need it, those who are still staying in Afghanistan, but also a two-way process. We need a humanitarian corridor that will still allow people to leave the country. And yes, that means opening up the borders, requiring in negotiations with the Taliban to basically ensure that aid is conditional upon Afghans being able to leave. And from there, what are the obligations of foreign governments is to allow, for example, for visas to be granted in neighboring countries, in Islamabad, in Iran, in India. We have to allow that access. We have to allow humanitarian access, but also for people to leave the country safely. It cannot end with these evacuation flights.
Sure. I mean, obviously, Afghanistan has borders, and you've mentioned the neighbouring countries. I mean, what degree of willingness are the neighbouring countries showing to people wanting to flee Afghanistan at this stage?
So the danger right now, and that's where the picture is very different from 25 years ago, is that Iran, Pakistan, China, Russia, they're all supporting the Taliban. This is, in a way, in their favor. So Afghans are also scared to go to Pakistan and Iran and other countries because they know they won't necessarily be welcome. They will be stuck in refugee camps. In Iran, they're only allowed to be in certain locations. In Pakistan, they're in refugee camps. They don't have the right to work, the right to go to school in Pakistan. In Iran, they have a bit more rights, but they don't really have a right to live a life in dignity. So the neighboring countries, even if they welcome some of these populations, Afghans have a different vision of society today. And again, much closer to that of Europe, the US, and the UK. So there's a global responsibility. And again, this was signed on paper by over 180 governments with the Global Compact for Refugees. We know what to do in situations of crises like this. We know that the only solution is to share the responsibility of crises that are often generated by politics and by governments all over the world. So we have to share responsibility today for what is happening to Afghans.
Yeah, and the fact that contingency plans weren't made, the scenes have been as chaotic as they have been. The threat of terrorist attack can't be a massive surprise, even though it's a massive tragedy. From what you're telling me, it sounds as though you think the world has really betrayed and failed Afghanistan.
That's how Afghans feel. That's definitely what I believe is there was a promise made to Afghans, a promise of democracy, of gender equality, of women's rights, of education, all of those rights which we know won't be there under a Taliban regime. So again, 70% of the population is under 30. So we're talking about people who've only known the last 20 years. We've betrayed them because we've told them today that that's just not going to be their future. So now that the world has betrayed Afghanistan, my message would be the world can't abandon Afghanistan. So we need to make sure, as I mentioned, humanitarian corridors, continuing to give refugee protection to Afghans at risk. And also what I believe is key is local response. Municipalities around the world have been great. The mayor of Bergamo in Italy or the mayor of Lille in France have spoken very clearly about their willingness to be there for Afghans. And so if mayors do this, if mayors are ready to include and integrate Afghans, then at a bigger political level, we should facilitate all access between Afghans and these communities in Europe who are ready to welcome them. And let's work towards their inclusion. Let's work towards their integration. They have a lot to offer us. And let's turn towards that rather than towards migration management or remote management, as is currently the case.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Nassim Majidi, thank you so much indeed.